So it's important sometimes that we make content that pierces outside of our usual bubble. We can get into the habit of talking a lot to ourselves on this channel, on this website, and as much as we love our loyal viewers, you might be struggling against the fact that some of your family members or uninformed political normies challenge you and call you a conspiracy theorist if you think, for example, that the government isn't acting in our interests and aren't holding themselves to the promises that they made. So, a message to your relatives who you may want to share this video with. Are you sick of your trains being late, your doctor's appointments being delayed, your culture being erased, your hotels filling up with young men that you have to work to pay for, and Coronation Street then calling you a racist if you notice it?
Connor, that first example is going to get you in some trouble.
I disavow Mussolini. And wondering why all of these problems are happening, but you didn't really get what you voted for back in 2019, or you can't understand why the opposition party which you might be voting for also has the same philosophy as the Conservatives, just a little bit faster, right? Today we're going to look at why democracy basically no
Barely
longer
even
matters.
that. Starmer's come out against mass migration recently.
Yeah, it's only a repositioning.
Well, yeah, of course it is, but still.
Blair thing. He wouldn't have a voter base otherwise. So we're going to look at why democracy no longer matters in the UK and why the institutions and Parliament are pushing an agenda that seems to be at odds with what the actual people want. And if you want to look at why democracy is dead, you can go to our website, subscribe for £5 a month, and listen to our book clubs. For example, this one on the populist delusion by a very sensible centrist, Nima Parvini. Interesting stuff on what we can learn from the Italian elite theorists as to how to appoint our preferred candidates into power, like Elon Musk is currently doing with Twitter and returning free speech to the internet. All right, first off, we'll go to the ULEZ zone. So for those that don't know, the ULEZ is like an emissions tax that is levied by certain districts. You can go to my segment on Uber, for example, or Josh's Wef's War on Cars segment on our website. What happens is, if your vehicle doesn't meet the ultra-low emission zone standards and isn't exempt, like you don't have a disabled badge, for example, you have to pay £12.50 a day to drive inside the zone. That's pretty much the whole of London now, because despite consultancy, Sadiq Khan has expanded it. This is most cars.
It's also coming to Manchester, I noticed recently, driving up there.
It's in Oxford, it's in Bath, it's in Edinburgh, it's in plenty of cities. Now, it is the whole of London and Greater London. If we can move to the next one, this is the Greater London Conservatives. Just scroll down, please, John. He promised a consultancy, right? And 68% of respondents, when organised, said no thanks. 70% of Outer London, 80% of people who work in Outer London, 80% of Outer London business owners, and 90% of black cab drivers all said no thanks, don't expand it. And Sadiq Khan went, right, will of the people, I'm expanding it anyway. And it's because he's got a massive black hole in tax revenue because he keeps spending things on diversity, equity, and inclusion announcements on the tubes, the buses, and in cinemas, and TfL just isn't working, isn't being upgraded.
Also, I'm just going to... This might be controversial. The idea of the will of the people, I think, is an inherently leftist subversive idea because they classify the will as the people as always being whatever pushes it leftward.
Well, they identify it as, we know what is best for you, and so we will impose on you what you stupid plebs haven't thought of yet. And so if you vote for against your interests, it doesn't matter what you voted for, we'll do whatever we want when we want to get in.
Well, they consider it as part of the sort of almost divine dialectic.
Yeah,
the will of the people is like the word of God, and and my book of God has been written by French postmodernists.
Yeah, okay, that's probably closest. It's more Rousseau's general will state, where the state decides what the general will of the people is and then just pushes it on the people. And if the state got it wrong, then the state didn't get the general will right. And if the people don't like the general will, then you're not a member of the people, are you? And you get the guillotine. So that's wonderful. Anyway, let's go next. Record migration. We didn't really vote for that, did we? The Brexit happened. We said we wanted to control our borders, reduce immigration. The 2019 Conservative Manifesto was get Brexit done. We're going to control our borders and get immigration under control. Well, as the Office for National Statistics recently released, we've reached 435,000 people increase in total migration compared with a year earlier, driven by non-EU nationals, up 379,000. From 379,000 to 704,000 people in the year ending June 2022. And that means that overall net migration to the population in the year June 2022 was an estimated 504,000 more people arriving long-term to the UK than departing. 504,000. So 500,000 people have just been added in the last year. And those people obviously all need transport, water.
Is that net?
Yes, net increase. Net increase. 500,000 people just got added in the country. Great. If we go to the next one, we can see the reason why, actually. This Telegraph article breaks it down. The increase is mainly due to student visas, funnily enough. A new high of 476,389 overseas visas were granted during the in the year September in year up to September 2022, up 77% on 2019, before the pandemic, of course. A fifth of them brought 116,000 partners or children with them, so it's chain migration by students. That gives a total student visa count with dependents of nearly 600,000. That figure is no accident, but it's a deliberate policy by Boris Johnson's government, which committed in February 2021 to increase the number of international students hosted in the UK to 600,000 by 2030. So it's 8 years ahead of schedule because of the potential economic and soft power benefits. So basically, we can incentivize the Indians and Chinese to get all of their lot educated here. They can do all of the money that their families have probably earned from employing slave labour, pay upfront for very expensive fees and top-class student accommodation, price everyone else out of the market, and then take all their skills and bugger off back home.
It's incredible how the Conservative Party are hyper-competent at things people didn't vote for them for.
That's a fantastic point, yeah. On Thursday night, Downing Street signalled a clampdown on foreign students with restrictions on the number of relatives they can bring and curbs on studying low-quality degrees to reduce net migration. So the idea is that they're going to funnel pretty much all of us poors into the crapper unis. Because, of course, there's a perverse incentive within the universities to take in more of these students from abroad because they can charge them more fees and take their money at the drop of a hat. Wonderful. What about all the job vacancies, eh? In this article, it breaks down the fact that not only is there student chain migration from Nigerians who brought 51,648 relatives for only 50,980 students, and Libyans who brought 467 relatives to 305 students, and then other nations who had one relative for every 2 students, being Sri Lanka, Iraq, Yemen, Syria, and Iran. Again, why are we letting people do that? All these job vacancies it keeps talking about, the 2 million people who are out of work, the number of work visas have increased by 82% to 248,919, largely fueled by non-EU migrants seeking employment in the UK. So all of this is, we need to increase immigration to fill these jobs. They are at new records, 82% increase. We can't keep staffing every job in the country with a bunch of people who have turned up on our doorstep and expect money and expect never to pay into the system but to get entitlements from it. It's not fair. It's not fair for actual hard-working Brits who have inherited this country and want to build a life for their children. It's not fair.
Connor, you just don't sound like you understand Pret economics.
Oh, yeah. Who's going to fill my coffee pot up, eh? I'm a metropolitan... Oh, whatever, the lovies. Anyway, next. Remember the 2019 Conservative Manifesto that promised to do this? An Australian-style points-based immigration system to control immigration?
Supposedly they did implement it. I just don't know how or what it does.
Yeah, the point standards are so low, they just let record amount of people in.
Yeah, that must be it.
Yep, I'm sure it's nothing to do with the 25% of the Conservative Party who are housing developers, who obviously like the fact that the property market prices are still very high. Theorist. Speaking of conspiracy theories, let's get on to the people behind the Hunt budget, shall we? Now, Jeremy Hunt instituted his budget fairly recently because of obviously how trusts and economics crashed the economy. That one budget that said a 1% tax cut that was supposedly unfunded, and all the banks and the gilt rates went, oh my God, we can't fund this. But mysteriously, when the Bank of England was printing money hand over fist, just digitally, not properly, by the way, that was majorly affordable. And it just so happens that getting rid of trusts supplanted the guy who did their really fiscally irresponsible policy and caused inflation and got him to be PM when he was rejected. It's almost like democracy doesn't matter anymore. Oh, what a conspiracy theory. Some quotes from this budget. Hunt said, he thanked the former Chancellor, George Osborne, for laying the foundations to make all of this possible. Keep George Osborne's name in mind. He blames global factors and Putin's war in Ukraine for inflation. He said, there may be a recession made in Russia, but there's a recovery made in Britain. Now bear in mind, inflation was 5.5% before Putin invaded Russia. This is in February. This is a creation of COVID policy, which Rishi Sunak was in charge of. And Jeremy Hunt wanted longer lockdowns modelled off of the Chinese, so he's equally as totalitarian, if not more. And he said, we will not change the Bank of England's remit. We must have fiscal and monetary policy working in concert. Just to remind you of what the Bank of England did during lockdown that got us in this position. If we can go, John, to the next one, please. The Bank of England decided to make quantitative easing. It's had to stop it as of this month because quantitative easing basically means introducing money into the money supply without actually printing new banknotes. So it's just digitally inflating the currency, but the cash in your pocket is actually worth less because it's not that there's more of it in circulation. So it's a stealth tax, basically. It was started under Gordon Brown and ramped up through COVID. They printed billions to pay directly for furlough. So again, don't be gaslit into the idea that this is all Putin. This is domestic monetary policy, which you had no say over because they locked you down and paid you to sit at home as a healthy person. Let's go back to the statement, shall we? So I'm just going to go through a few of the policies. Yeah, here's the amount, by the way, of quantitative easing that they did. $895 billion that they printed in 2020 alone. Billion pounds, sorry. Dollars, I'm used to talking about American stuff so much. £895 billion they printed to pay for furlough. Do you think that might have a problem with the money supply, why everything might start costing more. No? Guess I'm just a conspiracy theorist. So some of the policies that go here. Jeremy Hunt said the UK, like other countries, if we can go to the next one, please, John, is in recession. In the short term, as growth slows and unemployment rises, we will use fiscal policy to support the economy. Then, once growth returns, we can increase the pace of consolidation to get debt falling. This further reduces pressure on the bank to raise interest rates because, as Conservatives, we do not leave our debts to the next generation. What a load of bollocks.
What bollocks!
Right, but did you notice in there, he's talking about when the debt's bad, we're going to lower money printing and really tighten the wallet. And when things get better, we're going to reopen the printing and reopen spending properly again. Does that not just sound like Keynesian socialist economics?
Keynesianism.
Yeah.
Keynesianism.
There we go. He said, we want low taxes and sound money, but Conservatives know that sound money has to come first because inflation eats away at the pound in people's pockets even more insidiously than taxes. And then he immediately proceeds to raise taxes. So he wants to reduce the national deficit by 55 billion. So tax is going to increase 1% of GDP over 5 years. Income tax threshold for the 45% rate is reduced from 150,000 to 125,000. So those earning 150,000 are going to pay an extra 1,200 quid in tax every year. He's freezing tax allowance thresholds until 2028. The dividend allowance is halved from £2,000 to £1,000 in 2023 and halving again to 500 in 2024. An annual exempt amount for capital gains tax has been cut from £12,300 to £6,000 in 2023 and cut again in half to £3,000 in 2024. From 2025, EVs will lose exemption from vehicle excise duty, so that's road tax. So if you wanted to upgrade your electric car, because they're going to try and make you ban petrol cars in 2030, congratulations, you're not exempt from the tax from that. Stamp duty cuts for home buyers, which were announced in the mini-budget from Truss Quarting, will remain in place until 2025, after which the measure will be sunsetted. So they're still going to tax you when you buy a house, because they don't want you to own anything. A
government programme being sunsetted. Brilliant.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
That's a first.
Employers' national insurance threshold is frozen till 2028, so that massive high rate of national insurance is going to stay for another 5 years. Employment allowance retained at a new rate of 5,000 until 2026. 40% of businesses will not meet this and not need to pay any national insurance per annum. International tax deal proposed by Rishi Sunak, which was the global corporation tax rate at a minimum of 15%, is projected to steal 2.8 billion for the Treasury by 2027 to 2028, and they're actually saying about raising that to levels beyond what Jeremy Corbyn proposed in 2019. Again, you didn't vote for that. R&D tax relief for small and medium-sized enterprises cut to 86%, and the credit rate is up to 10%. And then a windfall tax, which was Labour's policy for the profits on oil and gas firms, which is definitely not going at all disincentivise them investing back in the sector and generating better energy, specifically with oil and gas, is being instituted to raise energy profits levy from 25% to 35%, and from January 1st, a temporary 45% levy on electricity generators is projected to steal 14 billion for the Treasury. How convenient that this comes at a time when the renewables ideologues have supplanted the boards of many of these energy firms and are pushing technologies which the battery isn't there yet, they're really expensive, they're subsidised by the government, and they know for the fact that they will fail and they'll have to ration it so they can control your smart meters, your smart fridges, your electric cars. You won't be able to travel anywhere, and God forbid you say the wrong thing on social media and it all gets turned off. And if you don't believe me, they actually drafted legislation for that, so that's pretty worrying. There's also a lie by omission here. If we go to the next one, Liam Halligan, the economics expert for GB News, found in the OBR documents, not in Jeremy Hunt's announcement, that there's a 23% increase in fuel duty. So 23% increase to the tax already on petrol. So they're just pricing you out the road. Now remember when Rishi Sunak cut 5p of fuel duty earlier last year? Oh, that might have been even earlier this year, actually. Yeah, God, this year's been so long. The government's inflationary measures had already meant that VAT had already rose to 7p. So even the 5p cut, they were still making 2p per litre up. So they're still taxing you to death.
And they will eventually just give you a fine for owning a petrol car
They're
or a
planning
diesel
to in
car.
2030, yes.
Yeah, that is what they are going to do. And at that point, it's just going to be like, are you going to stand up against it?
Yep, that's what my dad said. My dad is he fits pipes and boilers, and he said, you know what, I've never been on a protest in my life, but they take my car or they take my boiler, I'll be out in the street.
I think because of a lot of this stuff being mostly invisible to the mass public, most people don't pay attention to it. When all of a sudden it is literally just, can't have that car anymore.
Yeah.
Going to either fine it or take it away from you. That's when the penny's going to drop for a lot of people.
Definitely. So back to the budget then. What's all this to pay for? All these tax rises, right? We've got to repair the hole in the deficit. We've got to restrict spending, right? Oh no. So He's kept Kwasi-Kwarteng's removal of the cap on bankers' bonuses to make sure the bankers get paid, because they're definitely up to nothing nefarious and have never caused a crash in their life. They didn't remove non-dom tax exempt status, which Rishi Sunak's wife was benefiting from, because despite being billionaires and raising the taxes in this country, they weren't paying any of them themselves, of course. They had an extra £150 billion spent on energy this year. That's renewables, which again are going to fail. They plan to turn the United Kingdom into the world's next Silicon Valley by putting investment zones in universities in left-behind areas to create tech research hubs. If you'd like to see why he's doing that, you can see my segment linked in the description, not here, on how his wife and Jeremy Hunt, they met while she was recruiting more students for the Chinese government to bring them over and invest in the UK's university sector. So again, they're just creating entrepreneurial outlets for foreign governments to send over their citizens, poach all our skills, and come back and build up their countries at our expense. So the spending policies in the budget, there's a bit of a list. So they're going to grow government department spending at rates already set out in the next 2 years, and then 1% over the next 3 years. 280 million into benefits fraud. They've already paid Ukraine 2.3 billion. All right, John. The second highest behind 60 billion, but I'm just going to skip that. They've climate change COP26 commitments have been upheld despite the cost. So that's now a 68% emissions reduction by 2030. Education spending's going up by 2.3 billion for the next 2 years. Grant funding for adult social care by 1 billion. There's 600 billion being spent on devolution, which is another Blairist policy. So he's going to create mini governments all across Manchester and the Midlands and all like that. So it's going to be completely devolved from Parliament.
But you've got like mayorships and councils in those areas.
Yep.
What's the point of creating mini governments?
They're going to add way more. They're increasing universal credit benefits alongside inflation by 10.1%. It's going to be another 11 billion. Pension credits going up by 10.1%, and the triple lot remains in place, which means that our state pension goes up with the inflation rate. So that's going to be one of the major costs of the country. He's increasing NHS spending because you can decrease immigration, of course. So I can't believe
Where's
I'm
all
saying
that austerity leftists keep talking about? I keep hearing about austerity, conservative, penny pinchers. I don't see any of that.
Well, this guy was one of the architects of austerity, and he's been working with the former architects of austerity to provide us this budget. We'll get onto that in a moment. I can't believe I'm saying it. Tom Harwood's right.
Oh my God.
We've become a social democracy, which basically means that we're taxing everyone to death and redistributing any of the wealth. And it's gonna stifle innovation, and it's gonna make everything more expensive. And the government's gonna control the entire economy. Again, I don't remember voting for libertarian Boris to do this. Do you? And there's not much difference between the parties right now. Absolutely accurate. So who's setting this policy agenda, shall we? Oh, it's Tony Blair. Tony Blair's back in government. Great. David Cameron reportedly described himself as the heir to Blair. Chancellor George Osborne, remember, privately referred to Blair as the master. But Jeremy Hunt specifically said he's appointed to oversee the NHS budget rises Patricia Hewitt. Now, do you know who Patricia Hewitt is?
I've heard the name, but I don't remember.
In 2001, she was appointed to Blair's cabinet. So she was a 1997 New Labour MP. She was president of the board of Trade and Secretary of State for Trade and Industry, and then became the Health Secretary in 2005. So she's utterly reviled as an architect of the Blair agenda. Then he hired Sir Michael Barber, the former head of Number 10 Delivery Unit under Tony Blair. Then it turns out that Tony Blair has been prepping government policies because he worked with Matt Hancock on the vaccine rollout. He decided to stick his oar in on the Northern Ireland Protocol, where one diplomat said he does not agree with government on every point, but Tony Blair had certainly been a helpful voice. And in 2021, in January, Hunt and Blair held an online discussion organised by Chatham House think tank about the future of liberal democracy. In the 50-minute talk, they covered the NHS, artificial intelligence, the expansion of universities, welfare fraud, and China. It was a real love-in, according to someone who had been sat in on it. And then, as well, Will Dry has been appointed a Downing Street Special Advisor. He founded the anti-Brexit advocacy group Our Future, which has been aligned with Blair, so no wonder we're now seeking to re-enter the single market, like the Swiss are. So, as well, who's been appointed Jeremy Hunt's financial advisors? You've gone over this before in your BlackRock segment. Osborne's Chief of Staff from 2010 to 2015, Rupert Harrison. So, again, George Osborne sticking his nose back in. He left the Treasury to join BlackRock, where he was fund manager and head of a research team for the world's biggest fund manager. Rachel Reeves, Labour Shadow Chancellor, claimed George Osborne himself also contributed to the budget directly. If we go to the next one from The Guardian, it turns out that another portfolio manager at BlackRock, who said they wanted to remain anonymous, said that while some cuts would be necessary, the overall package and long-term plan contained within the budget are more important. So what's the long-term plan, I hear you ask? Well, let's go to the World Economic Forum's website. Larry Fink, if we go down to a little bit, John, Larry Fink's listed as one of their heads, which isn't fantastic. There we go. Lawrence Fink. Right, we go over to his portfolio on the website. Yep, we can just see he's founded BlackRock on that. So what's the WEF's agenda for those outside of our regular viewership who won't quite know? Go to Forbes. Welcome to 2030. I have nothing. I have no privacy, and life has never been better. Right. So you won't own anything. Digital currency, digital ID. Everything's run on renewables, which they can ration, and you won't have a car. You'll either have to walk, cycle, or use public transport, which you can have your access confiscated if you say the wrong thing on social media. So that's what this budget is building towards.
One other just quick thing about that was that your home will also be rented for business meetings when you're not using it.
Yes, and a drone will deliver your kitchen utensils to you and drop it back to whoever needs it afterwards. It's not like you needed anything anyway. So if we go on to this, this is our only hope, I guess. Reform UK. They're obviously campaigning as the alternative to the Tories. They're saying the Conservatives are currently making us poorer after 12 years of just doing a controlled demolition of British prosperity, and I'm inclined to agree. Richard Tice has also said he will never have any affiliation, if we go to the next one please, with the World Economic Forum. So you've immediately got my vote, because I'm sick of the Conservatives, personally. He's also been meeting recently with potential Tory defectors beyond the Red Wall, who have said, if we go to the next one, please, John, that we'll jump ship from the Conservatives over the migration issue and become Reform UK MPs. So we could overnight get some of the Red Wall MPs who were voted on a Brexit ticket to join Reform UK.
To join a party that might let them do the immigration reform stuff.
Yeah, formerly known as the Brexit Party, because they cared about Brexit. So if we go on to the last one, we're just going to say that Martin Daubney, who will be on the show next week, has said about the wonderful Nigel Farage, watch this space. We know you're coming back, Nigel. Just let us know when, because frankly, after the Conservatives have sabotaged the democratic mandate handed to them in 2019, when we all believed that hopefully they would lower taxes and not lock us in our homes.
How naive we were.
Yeah, well, you're our only hope.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as the premium articles we do, this one on Xi Jinping's lockdowns, with an audio track for silver and gold tier members. If you'd like to find out what else we're putting out, you can follow us on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.